Guys, it is cold and snowy out there, and I'm probably not going to be out there until Groundhog Day, if that. So we're going to do a little barn climbing here, and I'm going to try to give you the build-out details around the uCLIMBER and the safety protocols you need to run this thing properly. The uCLIMBER's been out for many months now, but I've kept it on a link private to the buzzboard members. I didn't want to put it out publicly until I did this safety video. So now you can find it at Tom Hoffman Tree, hit playlist and look at the uCLIMBER, and you'll see it in application in the tree. You'll see the uni with the quick hitch positioning, and you'll see the static line for fast access into the canopy. Here I'll show you the build out around the Unicender and go through some of the details, but really the important takeaway for this video is what I learned when I did other build outs. I've actually taken this idea and built it out 4 times with the Unicender, with a Zigzag, with the DMM hitch climber, and with the Rock Exotica Hydra. And what I've learned, the details are always different and you got to deal with that, but what I've learned is that there are 3 safety principles that cut through all these configurations, and you need to understand and appreciate that whatever you put in this primary position needs to do 3 things for you. It needs to be a good double line climbing hitch, that's a no-brainer. But it also has to be a reliable safety prusik that can operate remotely, and it also has to be a lanyard rope grab. I'll take you through the configurations and we'll look at just when this device serves you in each of those functions. Here's the uni, and is this a good climbing hitch for a double line rig? The answer is hell yeah, it's the best. The uni has always had a great reputation for very low friction advance, very little setback, and very precise control of your balance and your position when you're in a limb walk. I love this thing. Attaboy, Morgan. The knock on the uni has always been that it's a little funky to tend. It only likes to be tended in one direction. And different people have come up with different ideas to help with that. But I've found that the best thing you can do is just put the uni in the old climbing in a loop system. And when you do that, hitch positioning becomes so fast and so easy. It happens without even thinking about it. You can just pull the uni here and there, shove it into position, and you can do that under load or not, and you can do that without throwing slack in your climbing line. So the whole issue of tending just kind of vaporizes, and the uni always seems to be in the position that you need it for, whether it's limb walking or work positioning or power climbing. I think it's just a peaches and cream combination, the Unicender with a climbing in a loop system. Looking around the loop, the tending prusik has gone over to full life support. This is a 9mm sewn loop by Sterling. It's talking to a Rock O beaner with wire eyes, and you need those corner traps to make sure that connection stays fair when you rotate the loop. The connection to the saddle is the OmniBlock 1.1 Mini. I think the Mini is an extravagant choice in that position, but boy is it nice to have the swivel in that little vertical space right at the saddle. So to me, that's my choice. And the connection to the uni is a bunt line stoppered by a figure of 8 knot. The bunt line serves a couple of choices. It's very efficient vertically. When you bring the plain end in from the spine side of the uni, the connection will offset slightly and kick the end of the L bracket up, which is desirable. And also, the bunt line won't lock up after you've loaded it. So that's my choice. When you stopper it like this, it's a very secure connection. The bunt line is approved for PPE anchor. And then stoppered like this, the climber is held three ways. The bunt line itself, the stopper knot against the bunt line, and ultimately the stopper knot won't go through the slot in the Unicender. So it's a secure, confident connection that you can untie quickly. Okay, that's the DDRT rig. Let's take a look at the system from a static point of view. When you're getting ready to set it up as your static anchor, you're going to bring the tail of the climbing line up to the Unicender, and you're going to tie a safety knot here against the loop prusik. Now that's a change from my prior video. I used to tie that safety knot down here as a full marlin spike knot, safetied with a carabiner, and I had to tie it down here so I could reach it from the top of the static line to release it. I was lucky enough to have a world-class climber and now a safety instructor come and climb on the uCLIMBER with me, and he taught me a number of things, but one of them was that you do need that safety knot, but it doesn't have to be spiked as a marlin spike hitch with the carabiner. And so now I'm tying the safety knot up here, and two good things drop out of that. One is that the transfer from the static rig to the DDRT rig is quicker and easier. All I have to do is hook up the Omni block and pull the rope, and the slip knot will drop out of the line, and I'm good to go to load up on the DDRT rig. So that's good. The other thing that drops out of it, when we send the static line anchor into the tree and apply your dual ascenders, we no longer have to have the 8mm prusik that was guarding the left-hand ascender in the prior video. Let me show you why that is, why you don't need that anymore. Let's just look for a minute at the static rig. You may not appreciate from the prior video that the reason the uCLIMBER looks like this, looks the way it does, is that I wanted the static line anchor to be a completely redundant system. If you've seen my other stuff, you know I'm kind of a pussy on this. At my age, anything higher than the coffee table is in the kill zone. So I wanted this static line anchor to be completely redundant, and by that I mean no prusik or no cam could fail and drop the climber. Every prusik and every cam would be backed up. So let's just look at that briefly. Here's the static line anchor. It's up at the top of the tree. We're down here on the handled ascenders, and let's just test that redundancy. If the loop prusik were to fail, what would happen? And the answer is nothing. It would just slide to the safety knot, and the climber would be held. Suppose the climbing hitch failed or failed to grab, what would happen? The answer is nothing. In the normal double rope climbing ascent, the climbing prusik isn't even engaged. It's not acting as a prusik, it's just acting as a connecting link, so the climber would be held. What would happen if the left hand ascender were to fail? The answer is nothing. What would happen is that the right strand would pull through until the safety prusik, the safety knot engaged the loop prusik, and the climber would be held. What would happen if the opposite happened? Suppose the right prusik failed, what would happen? Now, this is where this gets interesting. Now, the right prusik has failed, the right cam has failed, and the left cam is engaged, and the climber's weight comes on the system, and the climber is held. What's holding that? The climber's weight has gone over to the left strand, that's gone to the Unicender, and the Unicender is now holding the climber in the tree. Okay, so the climbing hitch becomes the safety prusik for the static rig. Okay, fine. If you're using a mechanical prusik in this position, either the Unicender or the Zigzag, you don't have to do anything about this. You don't have to think about it, because you don't have to tie, dress, and set a mechanical prusik. You just thread it up and it works for you. But if you're going to use a hitch climber or a cordage prusik in this position, you now maybe don't want to tie your favorite double line climbing knot here. You need to tie a knot that is more like a hip prusik, or more like the climbing hitch you would see in a climbing lanyard. Something tight, close to the rope, a distal or a machoacon, something that you know at a distance is going to be there if it's loaded suddenly for you. Okay, fine. If that's the case, this configuration works. But some of you are going to look at this and say, wait a minute. My favorite hitch is a VT, and I climb on a VT. When I'm on my hitch climber, I like the performance of the VT. And as long as it's right there in front of my chops, if the hitch misbehaves, I can fix it. But I'm sure not going to send a VT 80 feet away from me and just hope that it's going to be there if I suddenly need it to back up my ascender. So some of you are going to look at this and say, geez, for the 1 minute that I'm climbing up the static rig, I'm going to have to climb for hours on the double line rig with a hitch that is tighter than I would like it to be. Okay, there is an answer to that, and the answer is right here. This is an 8mm sewn loop from Sterling, and all you have to do for this problem is to wrap an English prusik above the right hand ascender. And if you do that now and the right hand ascender fails, you won't be relying on the climbing hitch. The English prusik will kick in and hold the climber, and you'll still have redundancy in your static rig. Okay, one other thing before we leave the static rig. The cordage I'm using in the system is tendril, Sterling tendril, and it is a 24-strand climbing line, and it's a terrific climbing line. It does everything that you expect out of a good climbing line. But it's got one more property that perhaps you don't expect. Tendril has the property that when it gets more lightly loaded, it gets more static. That means as it gets more lightly loaded, it gets less stretchy. Not less stretched, every climbing line will do that, but less stretchy. And since the static line here is a double strand line, that slices the load in half and puts tendril right in the sweet spot. When you start climbing the static line, it feels like you're climbing on a kern mantle. It feels like you're climbing on HTP, but when you get up to the top, you've got this nice climbing line that holds knots and runs through your hands. I mean, it's a good climbing line, and yet it's very efficient as a static access line because of this this double line approach. How they do that, I have no idea. It has something to do with the core. It's way beyond my pay grade. I just know that I like it. I've tried several lines in this rig, and tendril almost feels like it's been designed for the uCLIMBER. All right, one last issue here, and that is, where is this lanyard rope grab? When does that happen? Well, let's go back to the double line rig and start climbing up toward the tip, and we're going up to the tip, up, 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 and at some point the loop prusik is going to contact the friction saver, and we can still keep climbing, but we're going to keep climbing by shortening this loop. And then at some point you're going to hit a magic moment. And the magic moment happens when the omni block touches the bunt line. At that moment, you're starting to pull tension into this loop. If you still keep climbing, you will start pulling tension into this loop, and the connection from the loop prusik will start to fall slack. And that means your double line device at that moment becomes a single line device. If it's a Unicender, there's no problem. The Unicender is designed for both SRT and DDRT. Thank you again, Morgan. When you cross into this regime, I call this the high climbing zone. When you're climbing above the double line rig, at that point the Unicender is an SRT device, and it's fine in that role, but it behaves differently. It will no longer self-advance, and it will no longer self-set itself. So as the omni block approaches the bunt line, you need to put your hand on the uni, and so when the transition happens and you go into the high climbing zone, you just advance the Unicender by hand and set it by hand, so when you bring your weight on it, it'll hold your weight. It behaves just as if you were using it as a hand ascender on an SRT rig. And that's almost elegant. It's terrific. And it allows you to sidle up to within an inch of your friction saver. You're very high on the rig. You've got great reach into the tree. It's terrific. If you're not paying attention when that happens, you'll get a WTF moment, because you'll be standing there on your foot ascender and the uni won't grab for you, and you'll wonder what happened. So to an experienced climber who recognizes this transition is coming, this is no problem at all, but I wouldn't give it to a beginner. In this high climbing zone, what happens if you have a cordage hitch in that zone? Hey, you're fine. You still have to advance the hitch climber by hand, but the cordage is only seeing half the weight of the climber. This is really more like a lanyard connection, because half the weight of the climber is on the prusik and half the weight is coming back to the saddle through the omniblock. So a hitch climber is happy in this condition, and the prusik is not going to lock up like it would in an SRT situation. What about a zigzag in this high climbing zone? Well, that's a good question, because it's partly technical and it's partly administrative. Petzl is very clear they don't want you using the zigzag in SRT climbing. But they have put out a technical bulletin which shows the zigzag as a single line device in a bailout system with some supplemental friction beneath the zigzag to help hold the weight of the climber. In that bailout rig, the zigzag would be carrying the full weight of the climber. The uCLIMBER, I believe, and this is just me talking, the uCLIMBER in this high climbing zone is actually a less strenuous application, because the zigzag only has to carry half the weight of the climber, much as it would as a lanyard grab. But Petzl hasn't approved that, and so if you can use the zigzag for the uCLIMBER, but you shouldn't climb into the high climbing zone on the zigzag, or Petzl will send the climbing police and arrest you and impound your chipper. Maybe. And maybe not. But I hope someday Petzl will put out a notice on this thing that says the zigzag is approved as a lanyard rope grab, single line device, lanyard rope grab. Okay, that's the three modes of operation for the uCLIMBER. Let me tell you when you're going to like this system and when you're going to think it's a hassle. I love it, but my climbing is mostly on trees with a strong central tendency, and I don't do a lot of recrotching. On top of that, most of the time I don't have a groundie, so I'm up and down a lot. So having the express elevator to get back into the canopy is just a godsend. I love it. But if you're in a spreading canopy and you know you're going to be doing a lot of recrotching and you're working with a groundie to save you the trips up and down, you're going to say to yourself, why am I putting up with all this extra stuff to do the recrotching? I can live a simpler life than doing this. So it's not for everybody, it's not for all the time. But for some people in some circumstances, I think it's a very useful way to build, to add a static capability, a safetied static capability to a double line rig. There's going to be one last video on this, and if you want to see it, hit the subscribe button. I'm going to compare the three different static ascenders that I've used: foot locking ascender, the dual sender from Rock Exotica, and the quick arbor ascender from Climbing Technology. I'll compare those three in there as they're used going up the static line. If you want to see that, hit the subscribe button, and thanks for watching.